Okay, and quite a lot is going to happen in the next 50 minutes. We're going to have to end at 1:45 sharp because some of our panelists need to leave to catch flights then. And also, I think we'll all be quite tired and ready for our lunch. Now, I know the pre-lunch slot is usually the hardest, but rather cleverly, Victor and his team have slotted in one of the most exciting sessions before lunch. So I will very quickly introduce who the panelists are. I'll give them all a chance to make opening statements, probably quite brief ones, and then we will get going. So we have Andrei Kostin. He's a member of the Supervisory Council, President and Chairman of the Management Board of VTB Bank. There he is. Tomas Melia next to him, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. Javier Solana needs no introduction, of course. EU High Representative for CFSP, Secretary General of NATO, etc. Kairat Kelimbetov, the Deputy Prime Minister of Kazakhstan. We have a couple of them. I'm coming up to our own Deputy Prime Minister in one moment. Bildt, Foreign Minister of Sweden, and Valeriy Khoroshkovskiy, the First Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine. Ми в Україні, ми надамо перше слово.
Since we're in Ukraine, we will provide the first introductory word to Mr. Khoroshkovskiy. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will speak in Ukrainian because today I'm in Ukraine, and I would like to apologize to all other aspects who would like me to use English. I would like to say that even the film that we have just seen very briefly tells us that the whole context of where Ukraine should be moving towards the east or towards the west is not quite proper for Ukraine, because the film was formed in a way that has shown us global context. And in my opinion, this is the only framework that allows us to discuss the issue that we are about to discuss. So where is Ukraine and where is its location globally? And when we are discussing the further direction of development after the post-Soviet times and the independence time and the context where Ukraine is located currently, I think we should say that discussion of this issue is in three different dimensions: strategic, legislative, and technical. Speaking from the strategic point of view, of course, I think that the biggest sorrow that may be caused by today's situation is that we keep discussing only current situations, and we are not full participation of the processes of the global world, both good and bad processes of consolidation, and also processes of recessions that took place in US and that we currently see in EU. We are not full-fledged participants of these processes, but we're only discussing these from our own position, from our perspective, and it's not very good nowadays, but that's a fact. And from the strategic viewpoint, I think that at this panel, and this is something that I suggest to discuss for our colleagues, that we need to look at a possibility of including Ukraine in the processes of the global discussion of the global issues. And then this choice will disappear, east or west choice, or east versus west, because a more global goal allows us to decrease the burning moment of this question. The second is legislative bottom line. I think since 2001, Ukraine is moving towards and in the European Union legislation framework. I'm not talking about the programs that were adopted between Ukraine and EU, but each another legislation since 2001 is being tested or benchmarked versus acquis communautaire. So it means that we harmonize our legislation with the European legislation for more than 11 years now. And of course, if the legislative framework is formed, to say that we are not moving towards Europe is not the right thing to say. Of course, we can say about these transformations and the quality of these transformations, but the goal is set. On the 15th of July 2010, if I'm not mistaken, we approved the legislative act which formed our foreign policy in the form of law, the full-fledged integration with the European Union. And again, I would like to emphasize that the discussion East versus West is not quite proper. From the technical point of view, I would like to say that we are moving in three main areas: the association agreement, free trade zone, and also visa-free zone. In each of these areas, we have our own strategic benchmarks and goals, but Ukraine is quite persistent in meeting all of these benchmarks for all of these three blocks, and even the parliament that opened up its session a week ago also approved several legislations already who are aimed at addressing this visa-free regime, and it basically says that we are not stagnating in this process. The only thing that we should mention here is that recently, and I think that's absolutely justified, that on the front line we hear the European values topic and political aspect, and it does not fall within the context of the legislative framework or technical issues. It's something totally different, and I have to say that this aspect came about not unexpectedly. We could have expected that this aspect may arise, but it's become so burning now that it basically shadows all our efforts and endeavors to become closer to the European Union. And speaking about the current situation, I think it's true that we may start from asking the question whether we share the European values now, and at what stage are we in promoting these values that are important for European community, which are the basis, starting base for any other participant of the integration process. Since we have more people in this panel here, I don't think I should be using more time to explore my position, but the only thing I'll say that it's not simple for us these days. It is not easy, but on the other hand, we are grateful for this approach of the European Union, because I think if we address these baseline issues, it will be much easier for us to then work in the framework of the European Union. I'm not talking now, and I'm really putting down the one really moment of choice between European Union and customs union. Tell me, who doesn't want to live in peace and friendship with the neighbors? This is really one of the basic goals and values that you have to have to be on good terms with all the neighbors. And it just happens so that we have a big strategic friend and partner, Russian Federation on the one hand, and on the other hand we have European Union, who has come together, become united, and its borders passed on our western side. But again, I would like to repeat, this is not the issue of choice, geopolitical or geostrategical choice. And to close up my introduction, I would like to say one simple thing, not to doubt where we should be moving to or where Ukraine is moving. First of all, we have to ask people of Ukraine. All the surveys show that from 54 to 60% of population support our movement towards European Union. It means that any politician that will go against this will not be able to exist for a long time on the political arena. That's why I call upon this, and that's why I'm mentioning this, that we are moving towards European community. Maybe we need some more help from our partners. Maybe the pace of this transformation could have been much faster than it is, but I would like to focus that we are committed to our strategy. Thank you.
Дякуємо дуже, пане Khoroshkovskiy.
Thank you very much, Mr.
You just
Khoroshkovskiy.
heard Karl from the First Deputy Prime Minister, his rousing, concluding remark that Ukraine is true to its European path. So, what do you think?
No, I did hear that, and I thought that was nice to hear. I think it would have been nicer to hear it from the President and Prime Minister as well, because I came here, of course, to a large extent to see where is Ukraine heading? What's the vision? What's the strategy to go from where you are? We all know where you are, but where are you heading? So I listened extremely attentively to the President yesterday and the Prime Minister this morning. And the President, if I remember it rightly, he said that you have a very good relationship with the Eurasian whatever, the Customs Union, the Shanghai Treaty Cooperation, the European Union, probably the G77, the African Union. I can't remember them all. And my reflection is only, if you try to go everywhere, you are likely to end up nowhere. You can't pursue a policy of reforming and truly modernizing a country without being very dedicated to a strategy and a vision. And that's why I thought it was nice to listen to you, if I am diplomatic in that respect. I read the IMF latest, this Article 4 thing that they do every year. And they published that one in June on the Ukraine economy. And as we know in politics, it's the economy, stupid, that at the end counts. And they talk about sort of, they look a couple of years ahead and they say serious risks and serious risk of getting stuck in a low growth equilibrium due to what they saw, and I'm quoting them, the absence of sustained reform policies. Now, this ain't necessary in any sort of way. We had a session on the European Union and all of the difficulties that we are facing in that particular entity in the morning. But if you look at some of the record that we did with 100 million people of Central and Eastern Europe, the 10 nations that joined, and look at their economic development during the last decade, it's, as a matter of fact, quite impressive and shows what can be done. I mean, their productivity increases were above East Asia and Latin America. And for all of the economic and financial difficulties they and we are facing at the moment, they are catching up with the rest of Europe. There's a convergence machine that is still operating even under the most difficult of circumstances. And that's driven by open societies, the rule of the law, and open markets. It's no sort of rocket science, really. The recipe is there. And overall, the recipe does work. The EU is the world's largest integrated economy, and it's a huge trading machine. If you look at the figures, the trades in goods of the European Union is as large as North America and East Asia taken together. If you take the trade in services of the European Union, it is larger than the rest of the world taken together. We progress by trade, and we export that model to other countries. Neil Ferguson was talking about the contraction of Europe and the figures of our declining share of the global economy. But the truth is, of course, that the rest of the world is trying to do now what we have been doing in the past. It's a good thing that the rest of the world are doing the trading model and the open economies that we did. So it's not a contraction of Europe. We are continuing to expand in spite of everything. Others are expanding even faster because they're adopting roughly the same model, and that should be sorted out. If I see it briefly from our perspective, and that's where Ukraine fits in, we are 500 million people. 27 will be 28 within months with Croatia coming in. We have a further 100 million knocking on our doors, so you heard the Turks are knocking very hard indeed. And they are somewhat irritated that they don't get in sufficiently fast. We can share that irritation. But we have 100 million further people, Southeastern Europe, knocking on our doors. We are trying to look at what's the relationship with looking east. We got 12 countries in between us and China. And that's, if I look at my figures, I mean, that's 160 million people there. You have the 80 million people of the Eastern Partnership, that is Ukraine, is the big thing. You have 140 million Russians who have now joined the WTO, that's a good thing. You have 60 million Central Asia, somewhat more problematic. To our south, which increasingly will consume our attention, we have countries that are racing ahead in terms of population. And we will add to the south of Mediterranean 160 million people within the next decade or two. That's 2 new Egypts that are coming there. There are massive problems there. But we will open up our economies as much as we can to their economies in order to try to get them to open up their economies so that they can use what is today demographic problem and transform that over time into demographic dividend in the same way as the countries of East Asia did a couple of decades ago. Very demanding, no guarantee it will succeed. But that's from our point of view what we are trying to do in order to orient ourselves in the world. And in order to succeed in these massive transformations of the global economy, of the European economy, of the regional parts of Europe, there's no way but to have a very dedicated, very determined, and very clear strategy where you want to go. Final word, one also needs to be somewhat careful with the brand. There's another panel coming on that. But brand Ukraine has taken a severe beating around the world during the last year. That is highly regrettable. We all know how it has occurred, but of course, regrettably, there's a high price to be paid for that. We live by what we do, but we also live by our reputations. So those would be my reflections on the speeches I've heard so far.
Hey, well, thank you very much, Carl. As you made your opening punchy remark, Minister Khoroshkovskiy turned to me and he said, "That's Bildt, always getting to the heart of the matter." So there you go. Next, we're going to hear from, we have the good fortune to have two deputy prime ministers on this panel. We're now going to hear from the deputy prime minister of Kazakhstan, Kairat Kelimbetov, and I have learned something interesting about him even before he has said a word, which is he apparently understands Ukrainian. Great.
Can I start? So let me start from four stereotypes, which is usually a big part of any kind of discussion where Ukraine should be on the east side or west side. And today is, I think it's time to stop to talk in these terms like confrontation issues, but more about how to use it in terms of the development of Ukraine further. And the first stereotype was on the previous sessions that European model of integration is in trouble, Europe in trouble, and don't follow the examples. It was, let's say, kind of the idea on previous session. I disagree with this, and I still think that the European model of integration is #1 of the world. And even the process of Euro bureaucracy or the decentralized decision-making process, I think this is a part of European values, which we should study very carefully. With 27 countries, big economies, and small countries could convince each other. I think this is amazing. Still, there are some particularly short-term problems, but in long term, I think this is again, #2 economy in the world and #2 competitive economy in the world. And I think we still have to follow all of the prescription, which was, let's say, main part of European values. So in these terms, I think this is unfair to say that we should not follow the examples, we should not we should stop to think about Euro integration of any whatever countries, and Ukraine is first of all. The second is also stereotype. Does really European Union think about Ukraine every morning? I don't think that the integration of Ukraine in top 3 priority of foreign policy of European Union. If Mr. Bildt mentioned about prioritization, is it not true, I think? Does Ukraine is a priority in top 3 in terms of the custom union countries? Yes. Maybe #1 priority. And so let's think this way. Issues in terms of, let's move to the eastern side. This was very dramatic movie in terms of what happened the last 20 years here. And is, I think And the previous session was about, again, the Gazprom, price for gas, etc. And two brotherhood countries, Ukraine and Russia, talked to each other in English language, and it was language of really not only, let's say it was a business, not the brothers' language. And I think this stick agenda in terms of, let's say, relationship between Ukraine and Russia should be over. Everyone understand it. Is it not win-win, or this is a zero-sum game? And I think now the custom union thinking really about the Kairat agenda. And if you see that we, at the end of this month here in Yalta, will be meetings of the CIS countries' government prime ministers, where we announce that the free trade zone between CIS countries is start to work. And I think this is also a chance for Ukrainian industries, which we estimate will increase according to these agreements by 30%. And frankly say, the Ukrainian high-tech and Ukrainian markets really based on opportunities on the markets of CIS. And they are more competitive over there rather than on European markets. So this is stereotype number 3. In terms of let's say, should we Ukraine think about the more multi-vectoral agenda? So we don't talk about the global players between, let's say, about the United States or China, the two biggest economies in the world. And I think in these terms, I agree with my Indian colleague, we should move us to more, not in ES, not only Eurasian, but European, but also Eurasian agenda in broader terms. Because if you see even in export of Europe, mostly now they targeted the relationship with China and with other Asian markets. And Ukraine should also think about this. There is a famous poet, which Rudyard Kipling, which mentions that East is East, West is West. Never the twain shall meet. I think East and West should meet here in Ukraine. And it's a great opportunities now in Yalta. But in broader terms, I think the development of Ukraine economy is really in cooperation, not only with, let's say, Europe and Russia, but in broader terms with Central Asia countries, China, etc. Because this is the really future markets. We could not focus only to work here in Ukraine. And also, I would like to add that we have to understand, so this world is not perfect and not always fair. We should be pragmatic. I remember the last Euro Cup in football, when it was Ukraine and British game, the UEFA was not fair really to Ukraine. You should rethink about this. Sometimes the fairness is not now, but fairness will be maybe in the future. And I hope the relationship of Ukraine with the custom union will develop and develop. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kelimbetov. I can't believe, though, that you mentioned that game, because it made everyone here who is Ukrainian very sad. There was a fight in my family with my British husband after that, I must say. I forced one British person to pay for it, at least. So, Javier, I'm a journalist, so my job is to sensationalize and twist the words of people. And I will do that with Deputy Minister Kelimbetov and summarize his remarks to say, the customs union loves Ukraine more than Europe does. So is that true? And if so, what's the European response?
First of all, thank you very much, Victor, for the invitation every year, and for the foundation and all that. Now, I would like to say that to the question, the general question, my answer will not be very different from the Bildt's answer. I think Ukraine is looking nowhere but inside the country. And I would be very happy if Ukraine were looking to Ukraine in order to get an important social and political consensus, to construct really a strategy will be supported by everybody. But what we have seen in the last 8 or 9 years is just the opposite. You keep looking at yourself, but you are unable to get and to resolve the basic elements of a modern state. A political class with a serious, an institution that functions, and at the same time a relationship with your neighbors, European Union and Russia, which is well appreciated by both. I have devoted to your country probably in the last more than 20 years, or I don't know how many, more time to any other country in my life. And as you know, I try to construct international foreign policy for the European Union because I believe that Europe has to be outside looking, and the process of integration for me is a must. But I have to tell you that my frustration is very deep. Now, when I hear now that Ukraine is more loved from the customs union than from Europe, I do not understand really the question and the answer. I mean, the customs union is something that is very particular. Let's put it that way. Now that Russia is part of the WTO, and you are part of the WTO, this customs union is not that necessary economically. This is something which is absolutely political. And therefore, Ukraine has to decide if he wants to be loved. I mean, I hope that you would like to be loved by everybody. That is a principle. But if you get into the customs union, I have to tell you that it would be more difficult to negotiate with the European Union because you have to do the work twice. For every agreement that you have with the European Union, which is clear, and you will have it very clear, then you'll have to correct it or to adapt it to the other customs union. So the European Union loves Ukraine. I don't know if more or less. I don't have the machine to measure love. But I think that we have been working together for a long, long period of time. And if you do the work that you have to do, and you adapt your values, you are not entering into a customs union, you enter into Europe, you enter a family of nations with values and principles. And you have to live by the values of principle if you want to be part of the European Union. A customs union, the only thing you do is exchange products. With the European Union, you exchange products, values, ways of life, etc., etc. It's up to you. But please don't think that we are, from the European Union, pressing you to do whatever you have to do. You have to do whatever you want to do. But please, do it in a manner which is consensual within the country, that is serious, that is well thought, etc., etc., etc. The door of Europe will be always open. Other doors probably will be out too.
Okay, thank you. Oh, okay. Quick response.
So very quick. Again, the first stereotype is that is always the discussion of confrontation. The Ukraine does not to make a choice. My idea of what was not to make a choice. This is not the idea. The idea is to walk both directions, on the left side, on the right side. The Turkey did the same. So they working with European markets, they are working with Middle East at the same time. We are in Kazakhstan actually. In between Russia and China is, let's say, more complicated picture than you have here in Ukraine. But the European Union is a trade partner #1 of Kazakhstan. So this is in terms of which values we are following. And stereotype, which we still have the last 20 years in Ukrainian elite, I see that any proposal from the eastern side is always politicized. So let's not politicize it. Mr. Solana mentioned the Russia member of WTO. The Kazakhstan let's say we have a plan also to join WTO. All of the customs union rules based on the WTO principles. So this is very pragmatic proposal. And Ukrainians always in history were very pragmatic people. Not choose between one and two. Use both directions.
Okay, well, that point that Ukraine is not the only country that lives in a difficult neighborhood that Kazakhstan does too is well made. We've been talking about who loves Ukraine more and how much Ukraine is loved. Our next speaker is Tomas Melia, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the United States. And I have to reveal to you all, as a sign of his own love for Ukraine, the last time he and I saw each other was in Ottawa at a Ukrainian-Canadian community event. So even when he is not in Ukraine, he travels around the world seeking Ukrainians to hang out with.
Thank you, Christia. And yes, I like hanging out with Ukrainians. That's very clear, whether in Europe or in North America or wherever I can find them. And thank you, Viktor Pinchuk, for this opportunity to participate in the Yalta European Strategy Forum. Not so much for this opportunity to speak for a few minutes, but for the opportunity to have listened over these last couple days to so many interesting conversations and discussions ranging well outside my area of professional interest and expertise. It's been really quite interesting to learn all the different ways that we can be addressing tomorrow's challenges together. This kind of symposium is a remarkable kind of event for somewhere in the former Soviet world. It's remarkable and unusual, unfortunately, in many of the other former Soviet countries. Yet these kind of honest discussions, some clashes of ideas and philosophies, some real differences of opinion being expressed here by Ukrainians to each other, by international friends to Ukrainians, this could be the new normal here in Ukraine. This could be the way that public discourse takes place all across Ukraine. Honest, open, serious. And yet, it's also an unusual kind of event here in Ukraine. And I think we're not there yet. Your country is not there yet that this is the new normal for discussions in Ukraine. There are too many constraints on honest conversation in Ukraine. It's especially noticeable on the eve of a major national election, that even in much of the media, the broadcast media, there's not a real full discussion of the challenges facing Ukraine, the challenges that we've been talking about here yesterday and today. So as we look at the election season that we're in now, it's important to note that this kind of discussion isn't out there for everyone to participate in. I'll come back to the election environment in just a minute. But let me go to the question of the panel, which is East or West for Ukraine. Well, it is our position, I think it's been said in some ways here already, the American position is that we want Ukraine to be successful, sovereign, prosperous, strong. We think that your foreign policy should not be East or West, it should be Ukraine-centric. You should have the foreign policy that matters for you, that works the best for Ukraine. We don't think it's a zero-sum game. We don't think that the more friends you have in the East, the fewer friends you have in the West. You can and should have it all. You should be well-connected in every direction. But it is also true that if you move away from some of the potential friends you have in one direction or another, it doesn't automatically mean that you have more friends in the other direction. You could move further away from Europe and not get any closer to Central Asia or Russia in political or economic terms. Ukraine could find itself increasingly distant in all directions rather than fully integrated in all directions. And that's the kind of choice that Ukraine has now. It's a choice that's made every day by people in the government and people across the society. The elections is another important moment for national choices, national decision-making. And I think unless or until some significant steps are taken to improve things like the election environment, you're not going to be able to move as closely as many of you want to Europe and to the United States. I mentioned the constraints on the media. There are some exceptions. Some of the media enterprises are providing more access to opposition parties and candidates, but some are not. Some of the independent media, like TVI, are undergoing very specific, directed harassment to make it harder for them to broadcast opposition points of view. That's going to lead you further away from Europe and America. And it's going to raise the cost of entry into the Western community of nations in Europe and beyond. So it's a moment of choices. It's a time for choices to be made by Ukrainians. Good choices will work. Bad choices will have consequences. And so I think there's a number of things that could be done yet. I think if the international community, the international observers were to give a grade today on this election environment and whether it's going to mark a step towards Europe and the West, I think you'd fail that test today. I think with the political prosecutions, the politically directed prosecutions against certain opposition candidates, that has had serious consequences on the quality of the election here. The way that the election administration is organized in a very strange way, with election commissions being selected by lottery and major political parties not participating in the election commissions that administer the vote and count the vote, that's going to have consequences for the evaluation of this election process. So there may be yet some opportunities over the next 6 weeks where the people who have the authority to make decisions can improve the quality of this election, and it may get closer to a European standard. And I hope that those choices can be made yet in the weeks ahead. There's a lot of international observers here. There's a lot of civic groups, citizen groups here in Ukraine that are studying the election, monitoring the media, monitoring all these things and providing reports of them. I don't think those reports get discussed that much in the major national media here. But there could be a real discussion here about the quality of the political process, about the quality of the election process. And I'm hoping that the kind of honest and freewheeling discussion that has been the hallmark of the Yes meeting here can be broadened across Ukraine even in the weeks to come, but certainly in the years to come.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we'll hear from Andrei Kostin, VTB Bank.
Thank you very much. Among all the subjects, my favorite one is love. So I don't believe in love when someone's saying is, yes, I will marry you tomorrow, but today you should share my habits, my tastes, my values. You should do this, you should do that. And that looks like a marriage of convenience, which the West is offering Ukraine. When we're in Russia, offer a real love without any prejudice and any preconditions. And of course, that's up to Ukraine to make a choice. But, I mean, on a little bit more serious tone, last week I spent in Vladivostok when I was chairing the business summit in IPAC, and we discussed a lot the subject which way Russia should go, Europe or Asia Pacific. I think for Russia it's a much easy answer because Russia was never committed to fully integrate in Europe, and AIPAC is definitely not this level of integration. Then Russia can do both and should do both, I think, in order to provide the further development of the economy and political development. While for Ukraine, I think the choice is more difficult because Ukraine always had those dimensions in the foreign and domestic and economic policy, East and West. But one day, I think they should make a more decisive step one way or another because the level of integration which we see in Europe and today the growing level of integration in Asia, in our custom union, is some kind of the borderline probably, which will require a more decisive steps on part of the Ukraine. Of course, Europe used to look very attractive, but I think part of the European problem today that United Europe was expanding too fast without deepening the integration. And that's the result we have today is that United Europe is on the verge of collapse. My question is whether Europe is ready today to enroll new members when they can hardly are keeping the existing one, like Greece, Portugal, or Spain. And what Europe can offer Ukraine today? Financial crisis, sovereign debt problem, stagnation. How Ukraine can benefit from United Europe today, whether European machine building industry or agriculture will benefit from joining EU. There's a lot of doubt which experts express when we're talking about the advantage. Just forget about politics, forget about any other thing, just purely economic issues. So, okay, maybe I'm not objective. I'm definitely a great supporter of the union between our two countries in the new form, in the form of a custom union. And our analysis shows that it's a lot that Ukraine can benefit by joining us together with our friends in Kazakhstan and Belarus in creating the common Eurasian economic space because of the nature of our economy, because the level of our integration existing and which did exist before the collapse of the Soviet Union. So I don't want to push it maybe too hard, this issue, but I think there is a way which both sides can definitely benefit, and Ukraine in regard to this issue. Whether Russia is always correct in making approach to Ukraine, I think not. I think Russia should be more flexible in the issue of the prices on gas. Russia could be more flexible on certain trade issues, and we have from time to time some substantial dispute in this area. Mr. Pinchuk knows it very well. I think Russia should do more in order to make this union more attractive, but my belief that from the Russian perspective, we both gain a lot from Ukraine looking east. Thank you.
Okay, Andrei, if that constitutes not pushing too hard, then I feel sorry for the guys at the other side of the table when you're doing a business deal. If that's the soft sell, then I don't want to see the hard sell. Javier has to leave us now, and already many of Victor's hardworking team are jumping up and down because they don't want Javier to miss his plane. So I'm going to let him make one final statement, and then it's up to you, Javier, whether you want to stay till the end of the panel or not. It won't be... You're going to stay till the end? Okay. You're flying with him too? Okay, then it's not my fault if you guys miss your flight, okay? I'm officially absolved of responsibility. Carl, do you want to make a quick comment now, and then I'll throw it open to questions?
Just a brief one on although this risk being a rather complicated discussion, this love thing. Russia offers love. Is it love sort of comes and goes and comes in different forms? And Europe doesn't, well, I'm just saying how things are. But then just to be very, very precise, Europe does not offer love, we offer law. And law is predictable and fair and good.
Okay, that definitely goes on the Twitter feed, love versus law. Okay, there is a huge interest in speaking on this panel. We only have 10 minutes, otherwise our friends will miss their flight. So what I'm gonna do is I will take 4 questions. You have to be super succinct, no comments whatsoever allowed. Address your question, please, to just one of the panelists, and then we'll let them all have a quick response, and that's gonna be it. Okay, so starting there, and here. Okay. Okay, so I'll take 6 then, but super fast, okay? So please, mic's over there. Can I have the mic over there, please? Tak, proшу.
Alexei Garan from Kyiv Mogila Academy, and actually talking about love, I would like to provide some figures because I've just double-checked the official CIS statistics, and I believe it's really important.
Question, only question.
Question is that if we analyze figures, then we will see that only 19% of CIS countries' export goes to CIS countries, and only 28% are import from CIS countries. The export of Kazakhstan to CIS is 14%, and for Russia is 15%.
Okay, so the question is...
it means that actually the markets actually for most of these countries lies outside of the CIS. So that's...
Okay,
it could be a question.
It wasn't really a question, but what can I do to you now? Nothing. Okay, so please, super fast, please a question. Потом.
Kostin, is it possible to ask?
Yeah, question, yeah.
So it's a very short, this just mentioned about Ukraine. It's reminding me, Yeltsin told this about crisis. The one war situation is bad, 2 wars not bad. So it's just like a European integration of Ukraine now. My question to Mr. Kelimbetov, he just proposed Ukraine to be into system, into integration. My question, and just you touch football also, do you imagine Kazakhstan in UEFA and Asian Association in the same time?
Okay, there's another quick question right there. Yeah. Then Marek definitely gets to ask a question.
Для ускорения восприятия Игорь Бураковский,
Institute for Economic Research of Ukraine. My question is about love. Mr. Dvorkovich said today that if Ukraine has very special relations with Russia as a member of Customs Union, we will get cheaper gas. Is it extending love for money?
Okay.
Buying love for money?
That's a good question. Okay, we'll have a question right here, and then Arseny will ask the last question. Yeah, Mike, please. Proшу.
Thank you. And this morning I was watching TV, and there was a debate, talk show, political show, about the same question, East, West for Ukraine. So this is not artificial. But you are right, Mr. Prime Minister, that Ukraine is not a top priority for the European Union as it is for the Customs Union. But, and that's true, from the European Parliament point of view, I am responsible for cooperations with Ukraine in the Presidium of the Parliament. I may tell you, not all want Ukraine in. But there are really motivated and devoted friends. And the question is to Prime Minister Khoroshkovskiy. Are you, if your choice is profound and sincere, profound and true, taken, are you ready to help us, your friends, to help you to implement the strategy? You know what I mean.
Okay, and last question will go to Arseny Yatsenyuk, and then we'll have our answers. Dobre?
I strongly believe that you do remember this song, All We Need Is Love. So my question is that, look, we've been in love with you for more than 70 years. Could it be that we offer you our love, but not just you offer the love to Ukraine? Do you accept this kind of stuff? We want to be just partners, but not lovers.
Okay, so now we're going to have a quick reply round, and let's go in the opposite order of speaking. And I beg the panelists to be concise. It will be, you will have to personally charter a jet for Javier and Marek if our panel overruns, okay? Andrei, пожалуйста.
We should answer all questions or what?
Whatever you want. Any question you like, a final statement.
Знаете, у меня память, как говорится, запоминаю.
Yeah, I remember the last phrase, so I will tell you about love. When you tell us about our 70-year-long love, it was our common tragedy. Why do you think that Russia imposed anything on you, that it raped Ukraine, but not the vice versa? Mr. Khrushchev was a Ukrainian, and he was our common leader. It is our common fate. It's our common tragedy. Just acknowledge it. Don't tell us that the greatest tragedy is the collapse of the Soviet Union. Just acknowledge that it is our common tragedy. You do have your own political strategy and vision, and I agree with that. Love should be mutual, of course. It would be wonderful if Ukraine comes up with this offer of love to Russia. We will reciprocate, don't you doubt. I agree with the expert who spoke about love for money. Love for money is much worse than the true love. But I am against aligning. I didn't listen to Mr. Dvorkovich, unfortunately. I don't think that there should be alignment between certain economic steps and love. There are certain issues between us. We have to address them. If we speak about gas price, then we should approach them economically. We have problems with investment. They are not aligned, and they are not interdependent.
You don't have many chances to talk about love in the State Department, so...
I'm tempted to recall the song that has the line about breaking up is hard to do, but I won't go there right now on this Russia-Ukraine discussion. I think a false choice has been presented here, that somehow there's a cost in relationships with Central Asia and Russia to democratic consolidation in Ukraine. I think that's a false choice. I think that if Ukraine continues to do what is going to be necessary to consolidate its economic and political relationships with the West. Real democracy, real administration of justice and rule of law, really free media. That doesn't cost you anything in terms of your ability to trade with neighboring countries to the east. So it seems to me like there's an obvious path forward for Ukraine to do more democracy and then do more trade in all directions. That's what I would do if I was a Ukrainian.
I want to insist once again that it's not a question for me of having and making a choice today or in the future. What I want, and I've given my time and my energy and my love in this case, to Ukraine, which is a serious modern country. I think when the soccer game was divided between Poland and Ukraine, I was very happy that Poland and Ukraine could share something that's important with a big visibility, etc., because it was significant for Ukraine that Ukraine wanted to be like Poland. And Poland is a modern country, it's a country in the European Union, it's a country that will be in the Eurozone pretty soon, and that is the imagine I have about Ukraine, a serious political country which unfortunately has not been done. The war from 2008 to today, it has not been taken, that time has not been taken to construct an efficient political class and efficient institutions, etc. And that is what I want. And really, that's what I think you should want, because it's the most important that you have in front of you. Without that, you will not have reputation, you will not have investment, you don't have the economy that you deserve, etc., etc. So it's up to you, but time is running out for that type of decisions that collectively your country has to do. You have elections coming on, you have still judicial problems which are very complicated. We haven't spoken about that, but it's very difficult to go to an election with the leader of the opposition in jail. It doesn't happen very often. So this type of thing, you have to solve them. And if you want to find a shortcut and go to a place where you don't have to solve these problems and think that you are going to have better life economically, it's your problem, you do it. But if you want, whatever you do, you have to resolve first this problem to be a serious country.
Okay. Minister Kelimbetov, please.
So there are several questions, so let me very briefly to answer to them. In terms of the love between Russian and Ukrainians, I think this too emotional discussion between of them really shows that it is a serious love, first of all. And let's pray that it should be happy love from both sides. And I think that historically there is no other choice. Number two issues was the point that, let's say, the trade between the the CIS countries are not very big. The biggest trade partner for Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan, European Union. And the whole idea is, in order to be competitive, to do something jointly and then send it to the other markets, which is not only European, but also Asian markets as well. So, I mean, there is not point just not to trade between each other. We have to develop these issues. We also, the question is about should we choose between European or Asian football association? So in fact, Kazakhstan choose UEFA, but football is not the strongest part of Kazakhstan agenda. Fortunately, we've got 7 gold medals in London in Olympic Games, but football is not strong. But at the same time, we are in UEFA, but we understand that we are also part of the Asian agenda. And Ukraine could be, let's say, like Turkey, follow the all Europeans' values, to implement all the European standards in economic terms, in social terms, in political terms. But after the crisis which we have now in Europe, the requirements to be new member of any European association will be very strong. And I don't think that Ukraine last 20 years economic performance is the strongest part of your agenda. So are you really thinking that your economy is so competitive to be part of European community? I don't think so. That's why you have to be pragmatic to implement the European, let's say, standards, but at the same time, don't forget about your markets is in the east side. And you don't use this very pragmatic way. So this is our proposal to be pragmatic. We also following all of these, let's say, standards. And I think the new proposal from Customs Union and from Russia, Kazakhstan, is Belarus, is also to follow in the global reality, but at the same time not politicize the relationship between what was done last 20 years. Let's think about next 20 years. Do you think that we should trade between each other? I think that we should do it jointly.
Okay, Carl.
No, I mean, the real issue is not really sort of going east or west, the real issue going forward. Because the global economy is changing at a breathtaking speed, and technology is really, that was illustrated yesterday. So it's a question of moving forward, moving fast, and a way of doing that is integrating. The more you integrate, particularly if you are small, and we're all small in this world, there are no European big powers left because of the size of the global economy. The more we integrate, the more we are able to modernize our economies and accordingly our societies. And even if I talk about the European Union and what we are doing, our vision is broader. I mean, I was in Russia before, Moscow, before coming here. And we would like to go forward faster with Russia than the Russians are willing to do at the moment. Because in Moscow they're saying at the moment, and I have a certain understanding for it, we've now joined the World Trade Organization. We negotiated for, if I remember it rightly, 18 years, mostly internally in Moscow, I might add, but that's a separate issue. And now they are there. And now it's a question of implementing all of the WTO rules. And they say, nice, we want to integrate with you as well, but now we take it somewhat more slowly. Our vision is really to open up markets overall, but we do it faster inside the union. And I don't know, I'm not critical against the customs union. I'm just saying that with the customs union, you of course need rules for decision making. Things that makes Europe complicated is that we are all there sitting around the table taking the decisions on all of the rules and the regulations. We are now going to open up the digital market for making a single market out of the digital market. We are increasing the integration of the service sector. These are difficult things. But there we sit, the Luxembourgs and the Finns and the Spaniards and the Swedes and the Brits and the Germans, and we all take the decisions. That makes it more easy to implement. So you are free to, of course, be there to adopt the rules and the standards that have been agreed, but it's the members that take the decisions. That's the political aspect of the integration. But key point, it's moving forward that counts, and integration is the key. And I would argue that the European Union is the foremost integration machine yet invented by mankind.
Okay, so this has been a panel about what is Ukraine's choice going to be. The last word is going to go to one of the top people who is making this choice right now, Minister Khoroshkovskiy, and I'm going to use my journalist privilege of sensationalizing and twisting words to summarize Minister Kelimbetov's latest remarks as saying, you know what, Ukrainians, you guys aren't even good enough for Europe right now, so stop kidding yourselves. Ну, це правда? Ви готові?
Так, I would like to try to answer all the questions that I heard. I don't think that in terms of love, it is not very good to discuss our integration because in terms of law, we talk about emotions. Here, it should be really pragmatic and strategic. This is a totally different set of phrases, notions, a totally different. So we started flirting, and then we had hardcore pornography at the end. That's how it developed. But I am really sorry that our discussion finally took that channel. Mr. Pinchuk said that it is a usual situation. Well, I grant him that. But a very important remark, we cannot choose partners depending on their economic situation. Russia had its bad times and we stayed friends. In Europe, they have not the best times. The only regret I have is that at the very beginning I said that we are not decision-making process participants. Had we been that, we would have done much better. Still, we preserve this gap and misunderstanding and confusion. You are looking for your own ways without us included, and creating an additional problem for our European integration. And the same way, from the point of view of Russia, I'm totally against such strict verdicts like the ones we had here. Russia is our strategic partner. Moreover, many things are done jointly, and they are very positive. And, speaking of competitiveness, though, like my Kazakh colleague said, Ukraine today is much more competitive than a decade ago. And as of the last 3 years, because of the high gas prices, we've become much more competitive than before. And in that sense, I would like to say that higher gas prices are positive in a certain way. It's difficult for our business, for our economy, but we've progressed. And the same was true with the pressure put by the European Union that was justified. We have this leap in criminal justice. As an expert, I can say that the new code of criminal procedure with the law on prosecution and bar, first bar then prosecution, that is in the pipeline, and this is very good for the society. I always think of challenges as opportunities. Thank you very much. Thank you,
And I'm
Mr.
very glad
Khoroshkovskiy.
that Ukraine has ministers who see difficulties as an opportunity to improve, because Ukraine certainly has many difficulties today.